"Get that woman out of this room." Captain Daniel Rourke's voice crashed through the ballroom like a judge's gavel striking marble. 300 police commanders, attorneys, city officials, reporters, and community leaders fell silent. At the center microphone stood a black woman in a simple navy blue suit. She looked to be in her early 60s. There was no badge pinned to her jacket, no security detail beside her, and no expensive nameplate resting on the table in front of her. Only a small leather notebook in her hand. 2 uniformed officers near the ballroom doors looked toward their captain, waiting for an order. The woman calmly closed her notebook. Then she lifted her eyes toward Daniel Rourke and said, "Before your officers remove me, Captain, you may wish to ask why the retired federal judge behind you has just stood up." Daniel slowly turned. Judge Samuel Green, the elderly conference chairman, was no longer seated. His weathered face had lost all warmth. "Captain Rourke," Samuel said, "the woman you have interrupted 6 times, publicly insulted, and ordered removed from this hall is Judge Evelyn Carter." A murmur rolled across the room. Samuel paused. The newest federal judge in the state of Missouri. Daniel's face went still. But that was not the moment that would destroy the life he had built. That moment would come later, when Daniel discovered that Evelyn Carter had not entered the conference as a stranger. She had been waiting 24 years to hear him answer one question. 7 hours earlier, before the microphones were switched on and before the morning sunlight touched the glass towers of downtown Kansas City, Judge Evelyn Carter had stood alone in her hotel room and looked at an old photograph. The edges had faded with time. The picture showed a thin, 17-year-old boy sitting beside his mother on the worn steps of a small brick apartment building. The boy's face carried the uncertain courage of someone trying to appear stronger than he felt. His mother rested one hand on his shoulder. On the back, written in blue ink, were 4 words. "Please do not forget us." Evelyn had carried the photograph through 3 decades of legal work. She had carried it through nights when she could not sleep, through courtrooms where truth seemed buried beneath procedure, and through years when she wondered whether justice always arrived too late to deserve its name. That morning, she placed the photograph inside her leather notebook. Then she looked at herself in the mirror. At 64, Evelyn wore her silver hair in a graceful bob that framed a face both gentle and disciplined. She had the calm eyes of someone who had listened to thousands of people tell their stories, and understood that nearly every human being was more complicated than the worst thing they had ever done. Her late husband, Thomas, used to say she could silence a room without raising her voice. He had been gone for 5 years. Some mornings, the grief still felt new. On the desk beside the window lay the official black robe she would wear at her public introduction that afternoon. The conference organizers had planned a ceremony following lunch. Until then, only a small group of officials knew she was attending. Samuel Green had suggested she remain unannounced during the morning session. "You will hear more truth when people do not know who is listening," he had told her. Evelyn had agreed. She had spent most of her life learning that lesson. People revealed their deepest beliefs not when they were being examined, but when they believed the person in front of them possessed no power. At 7:30, Evelyn left her hotel room and took the elevator downstairs. The conference occupied the largest ballroom in the historic Jefferson Hotel, a building of carved limestone, brass elevators, and high windows that looked toward the Missouri River. Banners inside the entrance announced the annual Heartland Forum on Public Trust. The stated purpose of the event was to bring police leaders, judges, prosecutors, civil rights advocates, and local citizens together to discuss constitutional policing. The unofficial purpose was less noble. Careers were made in rooms like this. Political alliances were formed over coffee. Awards were presented beneath bright lights. Powerful people congratulated one another for being powerful. That year, no name appeared more prominently in the program than Captain Daniel Rourke. Daniel was 57 years old, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and handsome in the stern, weathered way that television producers admired. He had served 32 years in the Kansas City Metropolitan Police Department. His uniform seemed tailored to remind people that order had a human shape. Newspapers called him the Steel Captain. He had commanded major operations, appeared before legislative committees, and delivered speeches about discipline in cities across the country. He was also widely believed to be the leading candidate for Missouri's next director of public safety. The morning program featured his keynote address, Leadership Without Apology. Evelyn read the title twice when she received the conference schedule. The words had remained with her. At 8:15, she entered the ballroom without ceremony. She wore no judicial pin. Her conference badge displayed only her name, Evelyn Carter. No title. No court. No indication that the woman taking a quiet seat near the middle aisle had been confirmed by the United States Senate only 9 days earlier. A young black police cadet named Lydia Monroe sat beside her. Lydia looked barely 25. Her uniform was immaculate, but her hands betrayed her nervousness as she rearranged the same pen and notepad several times. "First conference?" Evelyn asked. Lydia smiled with embarrassment. "Is it that obvious?" "Only because I remember my first one." "You were in law enforcement?" "No," Evelyn said. "Legal aid." Lydia glanced toward the stage, where senior officers exchanged handshakes. "I want to work in community investigations. Cases involving missing people, elderly residents, families who feel nobody is listening. That is important work. My father says I should choose something safer. Fathers often confuse safety with happiness." Lydia laughed quietly. "What does your family think you should do?" she asked. Evelyn looked toward the empty stage. "My father wanted me to become a school teacher." "Did he ever forgive you?" "He attended every hearing I argued until he could no longer climb the courthouse steps." Lydia smiled. On the other side of the ballroom, Daniel Rourke entered through a private door. People stood to greet him. Daniel moved through the room with the practiced confidence of someone who had spent years watching others step aside. He shook hands, remembered names, touched shoulders, and accepted compliments as though receiving reports from subordinates. Beside him walked Deputy Chief Martin Hale, his longtime friend and closest advisor. "You have the mayor's people in the front row," Martin said quietly. "Two members of the state selection committee are near the center. The television station confirmed the entire speech will be streamed." Daniel adjusted his cuff. "Good. Keep the question period brief. I know how to handle a room." Martin hesitated. Daniel noticed. "What?" "Nothing." "Say it." Martin lowered his voice. "Your daughter called my office yesterday." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Emily has my number. She said you stopped returning her calls. My daughter works for people who believe every officer is guilty until proven innocent. She is a public defender. She is idealistic. She is 31. Those conditions are not mutually exclusive." Martin looked around to ensure no one was listening. "She asked whether you were going to mention the Benton Review." Daniel's eyes sharpened. "There is no Benton Review." That is not what she heard. Then she heard wrong. Martin started to speak again, but Daniel turned away. Across the room, Evelyn saw the exchange. She did not hear the words, yet she recognized the tension that passed between them. Daniel stepped onto the stage at 9 o'clock. The applause was immediate and generous. He waited until it ended, then placed both hands on the podium. "Good morning," he said. "For more than 3 decades, I have had the honor of wearing this uniform. I have seen our city at its best, and I have seen it during nights when fear threatened to tear neighborhoods apart." His voice was strong, warm, and measured. He spoke without notes. For 20 minutes, Daniel told stories of officers helping stranded motorists, rescuing families during floods, and comforting frightened children. He praised sacrifice, duty, and courage. Much of what he said was true. Evelyn believed that made the dangerous parts more difficult to recognize. Daniel gradually shifted from service to authority. He spoke about citizens who questioned officers from the safety of television studios. He criticized courts that, in his words, made split-second decisions appear simple after months of comfortable reflection. Then he said, "There comes a point when endless doubt becomes its own form of disorder. Leadership requires the courage to act without apologizing for every decision." Several officers applauded. Evelyn looked toward Lydia. The young cadet was no longer taking notes. Daniel continued. "We cannot ask officers to protect communities while treating every command as a subject for public negotiation. Respect for lawful authority is the foundation of peace." More applause followed. When the speech ended, the moderator invited questions. The first came from a county sheriff who congratulated Daniel on his leadership. The second came from a city official asking about recruitment. The third praised his department's crime statistics. Daniel answered each with relaxed confidence. Then Evelyn walked to the center microphone. Daniel looked at her, then at the name printed on her badge. "Mr. Rourke," she began. "Captain Rourke," he corrected. A few people shifted in their chairs. Evelyn nodded. "Captain Rourke, You spoke about respect for lawful authority. Do you believe lawful authority also requires respect for the constitutional rights of citizens who question an officer's decisions? Daniel smiled. It was not a friendly smile. Of course. Then how do you reconcile that statement with the 2018 Federal Review that found your division repeatedly extended street stops after officers lacked legal grounds to continue them? The room changed. The soft noises of papers and coffee cups disappeared. Daniel's smile remained, but his eyes hardened. I believe you are referring to a politically motivated report that failed to understand the realities our officers faced. The report was signed by career investigators from 2 administrations, and written by people who were not on our streets. Evelyn opened her notebook. The review included interviews with 84 officers from your department. Daniel lifted one hand. Ma'am, I am sure you came here with strong opinions, but I will not allow one questioner to turn this forum into a trial. I asked about a documented finding, and I answered. You described the report as political. You did not address the finding. Daniel stepped away from the podium. Perhaps because the finding does not deserve the weight you are giving it. Evelyn's voice remained calm. Constitutional rights do not lose weight when they become inconvenient. A murmur moved across the room. Daniel stared at her. For the first time that morning, he appeared uncertain. It lasted less than a second. Then he smiled again. May I ask what organization you represent? I represent myself. Then perhaps you could allow those of us responsible for public safety to discuss the subject from experience. Several people looked down. Evelyn did not. Experience is valuable, she said, but experience does not place anyone above examination. Daniel turned toward the moderator. Next question. Evelyn stayed at the microphone. I have one follow-up. You have made your position clear. My question concerns a case from 2002. Daniel stopped moving. Martin Hale, seated near the stage, looked up sharply. Evelyn opened her notebook to a marked page. A 17-year-old boy was detained near East 39th Street after being mistaken for an older suspect. A store camera reportedly showed him entering the building after the theft had already occurred. That recording was never included in the official file. Daniel's expression lost all movement. Evelyn continued. You signed the evidence inventory. The silence deepened. Lydia turned toward Evelyn. Daniel approached the edge of the stage. I do not discuss old cases based on incomplete information presented by strangers. The boy's name was Aaron Brooks. Daniel's fingers tightened around the remote in his hand. There were thousands of cases during those years. This one involved an officer named Victor Sloan. A faint color rose in Daniel's face. Chief Victor Sloan had been Daniel's commanding officer when Daniel was still a young lieutenant. Sloan had died 12 years earlier and was remembered publicly as a decorated leader. Privately, there had been rumors. Reports altered. Complaints discouraged. Careers threatened. Nothing had ever been proved. Daniel looked toward Samuel Green, who was seated behind him on the stage. Samuel's face offered no help. Daniel turned back to Evelyn. Ma'am, I have given you more time than any other person in this room. You still have not answered. I do not remember the case. Evelyn studied him. It was not the answer she had hoped to hear. She looked down and wrote a single line in her notebook. Daniel saw her writing. What are you doing? Recording your answer. For whom? For myself. Daniel laughed once, without humor. You walk into a professional conference, accuse a decorated officer of hiding evidence from 24 years ago, refuse to identify your credentials, and expect this room to accept your behavior as reasonable? I identified myself. You gave us a name. It is the only identification every citizen should need before asking a lawful question. The applause began with one person near the rear, then another. It was not loud, but Daniel heard it. His face changed. A lifetime of command had taught him how to control disorder. It had not taught him how to endure disagreement without seeing it as disobedience. He pointed toward Evelyn. This is exactly the problem. People arrive with fragments of old accusations, speak with confidence, and assume confidence is the same thing as knowledge. Evelyn said nothing. Daniel continued. You have no idea what officers carried home during those years. You do not know the threats, the pressure, or the decisions made in seconds while attorneys examined them for years. Evelyn's expression softened. Then help us understand. I do not owe you an explanation. The sentence crossed the ballroom and seemed to remain suspended above the audience. Evelyn slowly closed her notebook. No, she said. You do not owe an explanation to me personally. But any person entrusted with public authority owes an explanation to the public. Daniel turned toward the officers at the entrance. Remove her from the microphone. Neither officer moved at first. The younger one looked toward his partner. Daniel's voice rose. That is an order. Lydia stood. She seemed surprised by her own courage. Captain, she has not threatened anyone. Daniel stared at the cadet. Sit down. Lydia's face flushed, but she remained standing. She asked a question. Cadet, I will not repeat myself. Evelyn turned toward Lydia. It is all right. No, ma'am, Lydia said. It is not. The words came quietly, but they changed something in the room. An older police chief from Iowa stood next. Then a county attorney. Then a pastor from St. Louis. They did not shout. They simply rose. Daniel looked across the ballroom at the growing line of people on their feet. For a moment, anger gave way to something more vulnerable. Fear. He had not feared the question. He feared losing the room. Get that woman out of this room, he shouted. The two officers near the doors took one uncertain step forward. Evelyn closed her notebook. Before your officers remove me, Captain, you may wish to ask why the retired federal judge behind you has just stood up. Daniel turned. Samuel Green rose from his chair. At 73, Samuel walked with a cane and carried the careful dignity of a man whose body had begun to surrender long before his mind. He had served 28 years on the federal bench. He had also been Evelyn's mentor when she was a young legal aid attorney. Captain Rourke, Samuel said, the woman you have interrupted 6 times, publicly insulted, and ordered removed from this hall is Judge Evelyn Carter. The ballroom erupted in whispers. Samuel let the reaction settle. The newest United States District Judge in Missouri. Daniel stared at Evelyn. The name struck him now. He had seen it in the newspaper. Civil rights attorney. Former state appellate judge. Federal confirmation 9 days earlier. Her official photograph had shown her in a black robe, her silver hair pulled back differently. Daniel had not recognized her. Or perhaps he had not truly looked. Martin Hale lowered his head. The moderator stepped away from the podium as though distance might protect him from the moment. Daniel's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Evelyn left the microphone and walked toward the stage. No triumph showed on her face. That frightened Daniel more than anger would have. When she reached the front, Samuel extended one hand. Evelyn climbed the steps and stood beside him. Samuel gave her the podium. She looked over the room. Please sit, she said. The audience obeyed. Even Daniel sat. Evelyn placed her notebook on the podium. I had not intended to introduce myself until this afternoon. Judge Green believed the morning session would offer an honest view of the discussions taking place before titles influenced anyone's behavior. Her eyes moved briefly toward Daniel. He was correct. Daniel looked down. I want to make one matter clear. My position does not give me greater human value than anyone else who stood at that microphone. Captain Rourke's mistake was not that he failed to recognize a federal judge. She paused. His mistake was believing that respect should depend on recognizing one. No one applauded. The room understood the moment was too serious for celebration. Evelyn continued. I will not use this stage to pronounce judgment upon Captain Rourke. That would be improper and unfair. Any professional review arising from this morning must be conducted independently. Daniel lifted his eyes. But I will say this, she added. Power is most honestly revealed in the way we treat people whom we believe cannot answer back. Her gaze moved toward Lydia. The constitutional promise of this country does not begin when a citizen displays impressive credentials. It begins with the citizen. Evelyn stepped away from the podium. Samuel announced an early recess. The room immediately filled with movement. Reporters hurried toward the hallway. Officers gathered in small groups. Phones appeared in every hand. The conference livestream had captured everything. Within 16 minutes, the video reached local news. Within an hour, it had spread across the country. Captain orders federal judge removed became the headline repeated on television screens throughout the hotel. Daniel retreated to a private meeting room with Martin Hale. The door closed. For several seconds, Daniel stood with his back to Martin. Then he removed his uniform jacket and threw it across a chair. You knew, Daniel said. Martin remained near the door. I knew a new judge was being introduced this afternoon. I did not know she was the woman at the microphone. You should have stopped me. I tried to stop you from turning the questions into a fight. You said nothing. I have spent 15 years saying things you did not want to hear. Daniel turned. Do not lecture me. Then who will? Daniel's face tightened. Martin approached the table. The mayor's office called. The selection committee suspended your interview for public safety director. Daniel looked toward the wall. The department? The chief wants you placed on administrative leave until the internal review is complete. For being rude at a conference? For ordering 2 officers to remove a citizen who had broken no rule. She disrupted the session. She asked a question. Daniel reached for a bottle of water but did not open it. Martin lowered his voice. And she mentioned Aaron Brooks. Daniel looked up. Martin waited. What do you want me to say? Daniel asked. The truth would be a beginning. I told the truth. I do not remember him. Martin's face carried 30 years of disappointment. You remember every detail. Daniel looked away. A knock sounded at the door. Before either man answered, Emily Rourke entered. Daniel's daughter wore a gray suit and carried a canvas briefcase. Her dark hair was pulled into a loose knot. She had inherited her father's direct gaze, but none of his patience for ceremony. You came quickly, Daniel said. I was in the building. Why? Judge Carter invited me. Daniel stared at her. Emily placed her briefcase on the table. She contacted the public defender's office 3 weeks ago. She asked whether anyone had researched the Aaron Brooks file. Daniel turned toward Martin. Martin shook his head. I did not know. Emily opened the briefcase and removed a thin folder. There is almost nothing left in the official record, she said. A detention report, an evidence list, and a dismissal notice filed 8 months after the arrest. There was no conviction. There was also no apology. Daniel's voice hardened. The evidence was weak, and the charge was dropped. After Aaron Brooks spent 8 months being treated like a criminal, he was released to his mother the same night. You know that was not the whole damage. Daniel walked toward the window. Below, news vans were arriving outside the hotel. Emily watched him. Did the store camera clear him? Daniel did not answer. Did Victor Sloan order the recording removed? Your information is based on rumors. Did you sign the inventory? Yes. Was the recording listed? No. Did you see it? Daniel turned slowly. Martin held his breath. Daniel spoke with deliberate control. This conversation is over. Emily's eyes filled, not with tears, but with exhaustion. You always say that when the truth gets close. Daniel picked up his jacket. I have served this city for 32 years. I have missed birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays. I have stood in hospital corridors with injured officers and told families their lives had changed. Do not reduce my career to one file from 2002. I am not reducing your career. Emily's voice became softer. I am asking whether one frightened boy was reduced to a file because telling the truth might have cost you something. Daniel opened the door. Evelyn stood in the hallway. She had changed nothing about her appearance, yet Daniel now saw every detail differently. The quiet posture, the measured eyes, the notebook held against her side. Emily stepped back. Evelyn looked at Daniel. May I speak with you privately? Daniel glanced toward the cameras gathering at the far end of the corridor. Is that a request from a judge? It is a request from a woman who asked you a question. Daniel looked at Martin and Emily. Leave us. Evelyn entered. The door closed. For a moment, neither spoke. Daniel remained standing. Evelyn sat at the table and placed her notebook in front of her. Please sit, Captain. I would rather stand. That is your choice. Daniel folded his arms. Are you here to tell me my career is finished? No. Then why are you here? To ask the question again. Daniel looked toward the window. Evelyn removed the faded photograph from her notebook and placed it on the table. The 17-year-old boy stared upward from the worn apartment steps. Daniel's face changed. You remember him, Evelyn said. Daniel did not deny it this time. Where did you get that? His mother gave it to me. You knew them? I represented Mrs. Brooks after her son's arrest. Daniel looked sharply at Evelyn. She continued. I was 39 years old. I had been practicing law for 11 years. I believed facts were enough if someone worked hard enough to uncover them. Her fingers rested beside the photograph. Aaron told me a camera inside the market would prove he entered after the theft. The store owner confirmed there had been a recording. Your evidence inventory contained no reference to it. Daniel's eyes remained on the boy's face. Victor Sloan said the camera was broken. The owner said it was working. Sloan said the owner was confused. And what did you believe? Daniel's voice grew quieter. That is not a simple question. It has had 24 years to become simple. Daniel pulled out a chair and sat. The boy matched the description. He was 6 inches shorter than the suspect. It was dark. He was wearing a yellow school jacket. The suspect was described in black. We received changing information. Evelyn waited. Daniel looked at the photograph again. Finally, he said, the recording existed. The words were barely audible. Evelyn did not move. Daniel continued. Sloan and I watched it in the back office of the market. It showed the actual suspect running out. Aaron entered almost a minute later. Evelyn's fingers tightened. Why was it removed? Sloan believed the suspect might have been connected to 3 other robberies. He said releasing the recording would compromise a larger investigation. That was not his decision to make. I know. Did he destroy it? Daniel looked toward the closed door. No. Where is it? I do not know. Evelyn studied him. He had told the truth and lied within the same breath. You kept a copy, she said. Daniel's eyes lifted. You were a young lieutenant, Evelyn continued. You knew Sloan was wrong. You could not stop him, so you made a copy. Daniel said nothing. Where is it? Gone. That is not the same answer. It is the only answer I have. Evelyn leaned back. When Aaron's mother came to my office, she was working 2 jobs. She lost one because she missed shifts attending hearings. They moved 3 months later because neighbors treated her son as guilty, even after the charge was dismissed. Daniel looked down. Aaron stopped going to school, Evelyn said. His mother wrote to me for several years. Then the letters ended. What happened to him? I do not know. The answer surprised Daniel. You carried his photograph for 24 years without knowing? I searched. They left Missouri. Aaron began using another surname. Records were limited. Evelyn placed the photograph back in her notebook. I was not certain you remembered until this morning. So this was a trap. No. You came in without identifying yourself. You asked about a case you knew was connected to me. What would you call that? A chance. For what? To see whether the man praised for leadership had become brave enough to tell the truth. Daniel laughed bitterly. And I failed your test. You failed yourself long before you met me. He stood. You think courage is simple because you sit on the other side of the bench. I think courage is expensive. That is why so few people purchase it when the bill arrives. Daniel looked at her. For the first time, Evelyn saw the younger officer he had once been hiding beneath the decorated captain. A man who had made one cowardly decision and spent decades building authority around the wound. Did you come here to expose me? He asked. I came to hear you speak. I hoped you might mention the case yourself. Why would I do that during a keynote address? Because your speech was called Leadership Without Apology. Daniel flinched. Evelyn stood. The department will conduct its own review of your behavior this morning. I will have no part in that process. Regarding the Brooks file, I am asking you as a former attorney, not as a judge, to provide anything you still possess. I told you! The recording is gone! Evelyn walked toward the door. If that is true, Captain, then perhaps Aaron Brooks will remain one more forgotten boy in a city full of important men. She opened the door. Daniel spoke behind her. I sent money. Evelyn stopped. He stared at the table. What? After they left Missouri, I found an address in Tennessee. I sent money to his mother. Under your name? No. For how long? 6 years. Why did you stop? The letters came back. They had moved again. Evelyn turned. Money is not truth. I know. It did not clear his name. I know. It did not return the school year he lost. I know. His voice broke on the final words. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. Then she left. By noon, the conference ballroom had changed. Daniel's keynote banner had been removed from behind the stage. Reporters waited in the lobby. The afternoon schedule was rewritten. Evelyn's public introduction continued, but the ceremony became smaller and more solemn than planned. She entered the ballroom wearing her black judicial robe. The audience stood. Daniel was absent. Lydia Monroe watched from the second row. When Evelyn's eyes found her, the young cadet gave a small nod. Samuel Green introduced Evelyn by speaking not about her awards, but about her years in neighborhood legal clinics. She listened before she was important, Samuel said. That is why importance never prevented her from listening. Evelyn approached the podium. She looked across the room. That morning, she had planned to deliver a prepared speech about constitutional duty. She left the pages untouched. When I was a child, she began, my father repaired elevators. He spent 42 years helping people rise through buildings whose owners never learned his name. So name. The room remained still. He taught me that character is revealed by what a person does when no applause is expected. Today, many of us witnessed something painful. We saw authority confuse disagreement with disrespect. She paused. But we also witnessed courage. Evelyn looked toward Lydia. A young cadet stood. When remaining seated would have protected her career. Other people followed. That is how institutions change. Rarely through one heroic gesture, more often through ordinary people deciding that silence has become too expensive. Lydia lowered her eyes. Evelyn continued. Justice is not humiliation returned to the person who caused it. Justice is not the joy of watching someone fall. Justice is truth, consequence, repair, and, when honestly earned, the possibility of redemption. Those words reached the hotel room where Daniel watched the speech alone. His uniform jacket hung across a chair. The television showed Evelyn standing beneath the seal of the federal court. Daniel held an old brass key in his palm. After Evelyn's speech, he remained seated for almost an hour. Then he called Emily. She answered on the second ring. Where are you? He asked. In the lobby. Come upstairs. When Emily entered, Daniel was kneeling beside an open suitcase. He removed a small wooden box from beneath folded clothes. The box was scratched and darkened with age. Emily recognized it. Her grandfather had made it when Daniel joined the police academy. Daniel placed the brass key into the lock. Inside were medals, old photographs, newspaper clippings, and a sealed plastic evidence sleeve. Emily stared. Daniel lifted the sleeve. Inside was a small videotape. On the label, written in faded black ink, were the words, Miller's Market, October 14th, 2002. Emily covered her mouth. You told Judge Carter it was gone. I told her what I have told myself for 24 years. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed. Sloan ordered me to destroy it. I put it in my desk instead. For weeks, I thought I would take it to internal affairs. Why didn't you? He knew about your mother's illness. Emily's eyes narrowed. Daniel looked at the tape. Your mother needed surgery. Our insurance had denied part of the treatment. Sloan arranged emergency assistance through the police foundation. You let him buy your silence? I told myself I was protecting my family. You were protecting yourself. Daniel nodded. Yes. Emily sat across from him. What happened to the real suspect? He was arrested 2 months later for another robbery. Sloan claimed that proved his strategy had worked. And Aaron? The charge was dropped quietly. Emily stared at her father. You stood on stages for years talking about courage. I know. Did Mom know? No. Does Martin? He suspected. Emily wiped one tear from her cheek. What are you going to do? Daniel looked toward the television. Evelyn's speech had ended. The audience was standing. I do not know. Yes, you do. If I release this, I lose everything. Emily shook her head. You already lost the most important thing. You are deciding whether to stop losing it. Daniel closed his eyes. For years, he had imagined this moment. In those private versions, truth arrived with clarity. He pictured himself feeling relieved, noble, almost transformed. The real moment felt nothing like that. Truth did not open a door. It removed the walls. At 3 o'clock, Daniel walked into the hotel lobby, carrying the wooden box. Reporters moved toward him. Martin Hale stepped between them. No questions, Martin said. Daniel placed one hand on his friend's shoulder. It is all right. Martin looked at the box. Understanding passed across his face. You are sure? He asked. No. Daniel continued toward the conference offices. Evelyn stood near a window, speaking with Samuel Green. When she saw Daniel, the conversation ended. Daniel approached her. He held out the evidence sleeve. Evelyn looked through the plastic. Her face remained composed, but her breathing changed. You kept it, she said. Yes. Why bring it now? Because my daughter reminded me that losing a career is not the same as losing a soul. Emily stood several feet behind him. Evelyn looked at her, then back at Daniel. This must be turned over through proper channels. I understand. You should obtain an attorney. I understand. Anything you say publicly could affect future proceedings. Daniel looked toward the reporters. I have spent 24 years saying things that protected me. Perhaps it is time to say something that does not. Evelyn's expression softened, though not into forgiveness. Truth does not erase consequence. I am not asking it to. Daniel turned toward the cameras. Within minutes, the hotel arranged a small press room. Daniel stood behind a plain wooden lectern without his uniform jacket. Martin and Emily remained near the wall. Evelyn did not enter. She watched from a monitor in the adjacent room. Daniel faced the reporters. This morning, he began, I treated a citizen's questions as an attack because I believed my position entitled me to control the room. Camera shutters clicked. When I learned that Citizen was a federal judge, I felt embarrassed. But my embarrassment was not the important part. The important part was that I would not have changed my behavior if she had been a teacher, a nurse, a retired grandmother, or a young woman without a title. He paused. That failure did not begin today. Daniel placed both hands on the lectern. In 2002, when I was a lieutenant, I participated in withholding evidence that cleared a 17-year-old boy named Aaron Brooks. My commanding officer ordered the recording removed. I disagreed, but I did not report him. A reporter called out a question. Daniel continued. I kept a copy of the recording. I told myself I kept it because I intended to do the right thing later. His voice grew unsteady. Later became 24 years. The room was completely silent. I have surrendered the recording. I will cooperate with every investigation. Effective immediately. I am resigning my command. Across the hall, Evelyn lowered her eyes. Daniel finished with one final sentence. To Aaron Brooks, wherever you are, I was one of the adults who failed you. I am sorry. The news conference ended. For the first time in decades, Daniel walked through a public room without anyone moving aside for his rank. His medals remained in the wooden box. His badge remained on the table. Outside the hotel, rain had begun to fall. Daniel stepped beneath the front awning and looked at the gray street. Emily joined him. Where will you go? She asked. Home. Mom is waiting. Daniel nodded. Clara Rourke had watched the news conference from their living room. Daniel feared that conversation more than any investigation. Emily touched his arm. You did one honest thing today. After 24 years, it still matters. Does it? To the truth, yes. To the consequences, no. Daniel looked at her. You sound like Judge Carter. I became a public defender to avoid sounding like you. For the first time that day, Daniel almost smiled. Then a sharp pressure tightened across his chest. He stopped breathing. Emily saw his face change. Dad? Daniel placed one hand against the stone wall. The pain moved through his shoulder. His knees weakened. Emily caught his arm. Somebody help! Daniel collapsed beneath the hotel awning. The reporters rushed forward. Martin ran from the lobby. A man in a dark gray suit pushed through the crowd and dropped to his knees beside Daniel. He appeared to be in his early 40s. He had attended the conference quietly, sitting near the rear throughout the morning. Give him space, the man said. His voice was calm and authoritative. He checked Daniel's breathing and pulse. I am a physician. Call emergency services and tell them we have a possible cardiac event. Emily knelt nearby. Please help him. The doctor opened Daniel's collar and instructed Martin to retrieve the emergency medical kit from the lobby. Rain blew beneath the awning. Daniel's eyes opened briefly. The doctor leaned closer. Stay with me, Captain. Daniel's lips moved. I am not a captain anymore. Then stay with me, Daniel. Something about the voice reached him through the pain. The doctor's face blurred above him. Dark eyes. A small scar beside the left eyebrow. A memory stirred. A yellow school jacket. A frightened boy sitting in an interview room. Daniel tried to speak. The doctor placed one hand on his shoulder. Save your strength. Hotel security brought the emergency kit. The doctor worked with controlled precision until paramedics arrived. Daniel was transported to St. Catherine Medical Center. The doctor rode in the ambulance. Emily followed with Martin. Evelyn learned about the collapse while speaking with investigators who had arrived to secure the recording. She removed her judicial robe and went to the hospital with Samuel Green. For 2 hours, Daniel's family waited beneath fluorescent lights. Clara sat between Emily and Martin, her hands folded around a white handkerchief. She was 60 years old, with gentle eyes and the exhausted grace of someone who had loved a difficult man for most of her life. She had said very little after Daniel's confession. When Evelyn arrived, Clara stood. The two women faced each other. "You are Judge Carter," Clara said. "Yes. My husband spoke about you before they took him into surgery." Evelyn was surprised. "He was conscious? For a moment?" "He said you had every reason to hate him." "I do not hate your husband." Clara looked toward the surgery doors. "That may be worse for him." Evelyn sat beside her. Samuel and Emily moved toward the coffee station. For several minutes, the women remained silent. Then Clara said, "Daniel was not always the man you saw this morning. Few people are only one thing. He came home from work when he was young and sat in the dark. He would not tell me what happened. I thought it was the stress of the job." Evelyn listened. "Years later," Clara continued, "he began sending money to a woman in Tennessee. I found one of the receipts. I thought he had another family." "What did he say?" "That he owed someone." "Did you believe him?" "I wanted to." Clara folded the handkerchief. "He became harder after that. Every promotion made him more certain in public and less certain at home. I sometimes wondered whether the uniform was protecting the city or protecting him from himself." Evelyn looked toward the surgery doors. "Guilt can imitate strength for a very long time." Clara nodded. "But eventually, it grows tired." At 6:30, the doctor who had helped Daniel beneath the awning entered the waiting room. He had changed into hospital scrubs. Emily hurried toward him. "How is he?" "The procedure went well. One artery was severely narrowed. We treated it before permanent damage occurred." Clara closed her eyes in relief. "He will need rest, medication, and significant changes," the doctor continued. "But he is expected to recover." Emily embraced her mother. Martin lowered his head. Evelyn studied the doctor. The scar beside his eyebrow, the shape of his eyes. A memory moved through her. She had seen that scar before. Not in person. In the photograph inside her notebook. The doctor turned toward Evelyn. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, he smiled sadly. "You kept the picture." Evelyn felt the room disappear around her. "What did you say?" "The picture my mother gave you." Clara looked between them. The doctor held out his hand. "My name is Dr. Aaron Bell." Evelyn stared. He continued. "But in 2002, my name was Aaron Brooks." Samuel's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. Emily covered her mouth. Martin stepped back as though struck by the revelation. Evelyn did not take Aaron's hand. Instead, she embraced him. For 24 years, she had imagined the boy in the photograph as forever 17. Frightened, angry, disappearing into a country that had decided not to remember him. But he had grown into a man, a physician, a man who had just saved the life of the officer who once allowed his name to remain stained. When Evelyn stepped back, tears filled her eyes. "I searched for you." "I know." "How?" "My mother kept your letters." "Why did you never contact me?" Aaron looked toward the surgery doors. "I wanted to become someone who was not defined by that night." "You never had to prove you were more than what they accused you of." "I understand that now." Evelyn touched the scar beside his eyebrow. "You had this in the photograph." "I fell from a bicycle when I was 12. She laughed softly through her tears. "What happened after you left Missouri?" "My mother married a man named Robert Bell. He adopted me. We moved to Tennessee, then Georgia. I finished school late." "You became a doctor." "My mother became ill when I was 20. I spent a lot of time in hospitals. I learned that fear changes when one calm person enters the room." Evelyn looked at him with pride that felt almost maternal. "Did you know Daniel Rourke was here today?" "Yes." The answer surprised everyone. Aaron reached into his pocket and removed a folded conference program. "My hospital invited me to receive the Community Service Medal tonight. I was scheduled to speak after your introduction." Evelyn looked at Samuel. Samuel nodded. It was intended as a surprise. Aaron continued. "I recognized Captain Rourke the moment he entered the ballroom. He had aged, but I remembered him." "Did he recognize you?" "No." "How did you feel watching him?" Aaron considered the question. At first, 17 again. His eyes moved toward Lydia, who had arrived quietly with 2 officers from the conference. "Then I watched that cadet stand up. I watched you refuse to be intimidated. I remembered I was not 17 anymore." Evelyn took Aaron's hand. "Why did you save him?" The waiting room became still. Aaron looked toward the closed doors behind which Daniel was recovering. Because I am a doctor. You had every reason to let someone else help. No. Aaron's voice was gentle but firm. I had every reason to remember who I chose to become. Emily began to cry. Aaron turned toward her. What your father did changed my life, but it did not get to choose my life. He paused. When he collapsed, I did not see a captain. I saw a human being whose heart was failing. Evelyn remembered her words from the ballroom. Respect should not depend on recognizing someone's title. Aaron had carried the lesson further. Compassion should not depend on deciding someone had earned it. That did not erase justice. It revealed the difference between justice and revenge. Daniel regained consciousness shortly after 8 that evening. Clara and Emily entered his room first. He looked pale beneath the hospital lights. Without his uniform and commanding posture, he seemed smaller, more human. Emily held his hand. You are going to recover. Daniel looked at Clara. I am sorry. You will have time to explain, she said. I do not deserve... Clara stopped him. Do not begin another speech. Daniel closed his eyes. After several minutes, he asked, The doctor? Emily looked toward her mother. Clara nodded. Emily said, His name is Aaron Bell. Daniel opened his eyes. The man from outside? Yes. Daniel remembered the scar, the yellow jacket, the interview room. His heart monitor quickened. Emily placed one hand on his shoulder. He was Aaron Brooks. Daniel turned his head toward the window. Rain streaked the glass. He did not speak for nearly a minute. Then he said, He saved me. Yes. Does he know? He knows everything. Daniel covered his eyes with one hand. The monitor continued its steady rhythm. I do not know how to face him. You begin by looking at him. Aaron waited in the hallway. Evelyn stood beside him. You do not have to enter, she said. I know. You do not owe him forgiveness. I know. You do not owe him comfort. Aaron looked through the small glass window in the door. No, he said. But I owe myself an ending. They entered together. Daniel saw Evelyn first. Then Aaron. His breathing became shallow. Aaron approached the bed. For a long moment, the two men looked at each other. Daniel spoke first. I remember your jacket. Aaron nodded. My mother bought it for school. You kept saying you had arrived after the robbery. I had. I knew. Aaron's face remained calm. Daniel's eyes filled. I watched the recording. I know. I should have taken it directly to the prosecutor. Yes. I should have told your mother. Yes. I should have found you when I finally had the courage. Yes. Each answer landed without cruelty. Daniel looked down. You saved my life. Aaron pulled a chair beside the bed. I treated you. Why? Because your heart did not ask whether you deserved another chance. Daniel looked at him. Aaron continued. But what you do with that chance is no longer a medical question. Evelyn remained near the door. Daniel's voice shook. Can you forgive me? Aaron looked toward the rain-dark window. When I was 17, I imagined this moment many times. In some versions, you begged. In others, you denied everything. I believed hearing you apologize would return something to me. He looked back at Daniel. It does not. Daniel closed his eyes. The years remain gone, Aaron said. My mother died believing the city would never admit what happened. I cannot change that. I am sorry. I believe you. Daniel opened his eyes. Aaron leaned forward. Forgiveness is not pretending the wound never happened. It is deciding the wound will not control every room I enter. Does that mean you forgive me? It means I will not spend the rest of my life hating you. Daniel's tears moved silently toward his temples. Aaron stood. The rest must be earned in truth. After Aaron left, Daniel looked toward Evelyn. You found him. No, she said. He found the man he chose to become. Daniel remained in the hospital for 5 days. During that time, the recording from Miller's Market was transferred to federal investigators. Digital specialists restored the aging footage. The images were grainy, but clear enough. At 8:41 p.m., a man in a dark jacket ran from the market. At 8:42, 17-year-old Aaron Brooks entered wearing a yellow school jacket and carrying a bag of groceries. The recording also contained 30 seconds of sound captured after the camera had been removed from the wall. Chief Victor Sloan's voice could be heard ordering a young Daniel Rourke to leave the tape out of the evidence log. Daniel's voice responded. This clears the boy, Sloan said. It complicates a larger case. Daniel answered, "It is still the truth." For a moment, those who listened believed the tape might partially redeem him. Then Sloane issued the threat. "You have a sick wife and a new baby. Decide what matters." There was a long silence. Finally, Daniel said, "What do you want me to write?" That final sentence became the most discussed part of the recording. Some people heard cowardice. Others heard fear. Evelyn heard a door closing inside a young man. But the recording contained one last surprise. After Sloane left the market office, the camera continued recording. Daniel could be heard speaking quietly to himself. "I will keep a copy." Then another voice answered from near the doorway. "Make sure you do." Investigators enhanced the sound. The second voice belonged to Officer Martin Hale. Martin had been a patrol officer in 2002. When questioned, he admitted he had seen Daniel hide the tape. "Why did you remain silent?" investigators asked. Martin sat beneath the bright lights of an interview room and gave the only answer he had. "Because I was afraid too." The inquiry expanded. Several retired officers came forward with information about Victor Sloane. Old complaints were reopened. Families who had waited years to be heard were finally contacted. Daniel cooperated fully. He surrendered letters, financial records, and personal notes. He accepted responsibility without asking that Sloane's threats excuse him. Martin resigned as deputy chief and became a witness in the investigation. The consequences were serious. Daniel lost his position, pension privileges connected to command status, and the public safety appointment he had pursued for years. Professional organizations withdrew awards. His portrait was removed from the department's leadership hall. Yet something unexpected also happened. Young officers began discussing the case in training rooms, not as the story of a perfect hero or a simple villain, as a warning about the first compromise. Daniel had not awakened one morning as the man who shouted at Evelyn Carter. He had become that man slowly. One silence, one rationalization, one promotion built upon an uncorrected wrong. The lesson unsettled people because it was ordinary. Most moral failures did not announce themselves as evil. They arrived disguised as necessity. 3 months later, Aaron Brooks stood inside a county courtroom while a judge formally declared that the 2002 detention and accusation against him had lacked legal foundation. The court record was corrected. His mother's name, Ruth Brooks, was read aloud. Aaron held her old handkerchief during the hearing. Evelyn sat in the gallery, not as the presiding judge, but as the attorney who had once promised a frightened mother that she would not forget. Samuel Green sat beside her. Lydia Monroe, now completing field training, attended in uniform. Emily Rourke represented Aaron through the final paperwork, though she refused payment. Daniel did not enter the courtroom. He waited outside. He wore a plain brown coat and carried no badge. When Aaron emerged, reporters gathered around him. A journalist asked whether the corrected record gave him closure. Aaron looked toward Daniel, standing alone near the courthouse steps. "Closure is not a door that shuts behind us," he said. "It is a road we finally become free to walk." The reporters asked whether he had forgiven Daniel. Aaron answered carefully, "I have chosen not to hate him. That is not the same as removing accountability." When the reporters left, Daniel approached. He held an envelope. "This belongs to you," he said. Aaron opened it. Inside were copies of every money order Daniel had sent to Ruth Brooks. There was also a letter. "I wrote that in 2008, Daniel said. "I never mailed it." Aaron unfolded the paper. The writing was faded. "Dear Aaron, you told the truth. I knew it, and I failed to say so when it mattered." Aaron read no further. He placed the letter back inside the envelope. "My mother would have wanted to see this. I know. You should have sent it. I know." Daniel looked toward the courthouse doors. "I cannot give you back the years. No. I am trying to decide what a man does after the truth arrives too late." Aaron considered him. He stops asking whether it is too late and starts doing what is right with the time that remains. Daniel nodded. It was not forgiveness. It was a direction. 6 months later, the Heartland Forum on Public Trust gathered again in the same hotel ballroom. The organizers had considered changing the venue, but Evelyn argued against it. Rooms should not be abandoned simply because truth entered them painfully, she said. The stage looked different. There were no giant portraits of keynote speakers. No speech was titled Leadership Without Apology. Instead, the conference opened with a round table composed of citizens, officers, attorneys, teachers, and medical workers. Lydia Monroe spoke about the responsibility of young officers to question unlawful orders. Martin Hale spoke about the cost of silent loyalty. Emily Rourke discussed the importance of preserving evidence. Aaron delivered the keynote address. Daniel sat in the last row. He had not been invited as an honored guest. He had purchased an ordinary ticket. Some people stared at him. Some avoided him. Others offered quiet greetings. He accepted each response without complaint. Aaron stood at the podium. 1 year ago, he began, a man believed authority meant he did not have to listen. A woman reminded him that every citizen has the right to ask a question. He looked toward Evelyn. She later said justice was not humiliation returned to the person who caused it. Aaron paused. I have spent much of my life believing justice would arrive when the people who hurt me finally felt the pain I carried. I was wrong. Daniel lowered his eyes. Justice arrived when the truth no longer needed my anger to remain alive. The room was silent. Aaron told the story of his mother. He spoke about leaving school, returning years later, and becoming a physician. He spoke about Daniel's collapse beneath the hotel awning. I did not know, when I began treating him, whether he would ever confess. I did not know whether he would change. I knew only that another human life had been placed in my hands. He looked toward Daniel. What he did afterward belonged to him. Then Aaron revealed something that no one outside a small circle knew. When my mother became ill, an anonymous fund helped pay for my first year of community college. I believe the money came from a local church. Daniel looked up. Aaron continued. 3 weeks ago, financial records showed the money came from Daniel Rourke. Whispers moved across the room. Evelyn turned toward Daniel. He looked stunned that Aaron had mentioned it. Aaron raised one hand. Let me be clear. Money did not repair the lie. Secret kindness does not cancel public harm. Daniel nodded slowly. But human beings are rarely contained by a single truth. Daniel Rourke was the officer who failed me. He was also the stranger who helped me return to school. Aaron's voice deepened. The tragedy is not that there was no goodness in him. The tragedy is that he trusted his fear more than his goodness. Evelyn felt the words settle over the room. This was the truth that simple stories often refuse to hold. Daniel had not been secretly innocent. Aaron had not been secretly innocent. Aaron had not been secretly innocent. Evelyn had not uncovered every answer through her own strength. They were flawed human beings joined by one wrong decision and the long road that followed it. Aaron finished his speech. Then he looked toward the back row. Daniel, would you stand? A visible tension crossed the ballroom. Daniel remained seated for a moment. Then he rose. Aaron did not invite him to the stage. He did not ask the audience to applaud. He simply said, I want you to see the room you once believed you controlled. Daniel looked across the faces. Officers, citizens, judges, young cadets, old families, people who respected him, people who distrusted him, people who had forgiven him, people who never would. Aaron continued, No one in this room belongs beneath you. Daniel's eyes filled. No, he said. His voice carried through the ballroom. They do not. Aaron nodded. And you do not become worthy by standing above them. Daniel looked toward Evelyn. Then how? Evelyn answered from the front row. By standing accountable among them. Daniel remained on his feet. Slowly, Lydia Monroe stood. Then Emily. Then Martin. Then Clara Rourke. They did not stand in celebration of Daniel. They stood in recognition of a difficult truth. Accountability was not exile from humanity. Aaron stepped away from the podium. The audience began to rise. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was standing. Daniel looked around, overwhelmed. No one applauded. The silence held more dignity than applause could have carried. Evelyn reached into her notebook and removed the old photograph. After the conference, she found Aaron near the ballroom doors. I believe this belongs to you, she said. Aaron looked at the picture of himself beside his mother. He turned it over and read the words. Please do not forget us. My mother wrote this? Yes. Aaron held the photograph against his chest. She believed you would keep your promise. I was not certain I had. You did. Evelyn looked toward Daniel, who stood across the room speaking quietly with Lydia. I almost gave up. But you did not. Aaron smiled. That is what keeping a promise often looks like. Evelyn and Aaron walked toward the hotel exit. Evening sunlight shone through the glass doors, turning the polished floor gold. Before they reached the lobby, Aaron stopped. There is one thing I never understood. What? How did you know to ask about my case at the conference? The file had been buried for years. Evelyn opened her notebook. Inside was a plain white envelope. No return address, she said. It arrived at my chambers 3 weeks before the conference. Aaron unfolded the short message inside. Ask Captain Daniel Rourke what happened to the Miller's Market tape. At the bottom were 3 initials. ERR. Aaron looked confused. Who sent it? A voice behind them answered. I did. Emily Rourke stood several feet away. Daniel's daughter held her canvas briefcase against her side. My full name is Emily Ruth Rourke, she said. Aaron stared. Ruth? Emily nodded. My mother gave me the name, but my father chose it. She looked toward Daniel. When I was born, he had recently met your mother during the investigation. He said she was the bravest woman he had ever seen. Daniel stood across the ballroom, unaware that the final secret had been revealed. Emily continued. I found the videotape listed in an old personal inventory after my grandfather's house was sold. My father had moved the box before I could open it. I knew he was hiding something. So you contacted Judge Carter. I needed someone he could not intimidate. Evelyn looked at her. You knew I had represented Aaron. I found your name in the old court file. Why did you sign only your initials? Because I was not certain whether I was betraying my father or saving him. Aaron looked toward Daniel. You did both. Emily's eyes filled. I hoped he would tell the truth when Judge Carter asked. He did not, Evelyn said. No. Emily watched her father help Samuel Green into his coat. But eventually he did. Aaron folded the note. The last twist was not hidden in a videotape, a courtroom, or an old police file. It lived in the name of Daniel Rourke's only daughter, Emily Ruth Rourke. For 31 years, Daniel had spoken the name Ruth with love. The name of the mother he had failed. The name of the woman whose courage had quietly haunted every promotion, every speech, and every morning he fastened a badge over his heart. He had not forgotten. He had simply mistaken remembering for redemption. Outside, the city lights began to glow. Evelyn closed her notebook for the final time. 24 years earlier, Ruth Brooks had asked not to be forgotten. She had not asked for revenge. She had not asked to see powerful people humiliated. She had asked for memory. And memory, when joined with courage, had finally become truth. Daniel left the hotel without a uniform. Aaron left with his mother's photograph. Emily walked between them. They did not leave as friends. Some distances could not be crossed in a single evening. But they walked beneath the same evening sky, each carrying a different part of the story. The man who had hidden the truth. The boy who had survived it. The daughter who had uncovered it. And the judge who had refused to let a forgotten promise die. Justice had not arrived like thunder. It had arrived slowly. Through an old photograph. Through a frightened cadet who chose to stand. Through a daughter brave enough to question the father she loved. Through a doctor who saved the life of the man who once failed him. And through one quiet question asked in a crowded room. A question that had waited 24 years for an honest answer.